everyone, and welcome back to the Painted Porch. We are here for our August book club. My name is Sierra Ram Cantrell, and I am joined by Amy Yakowski and Rob Hunter. And together we are Painted Porch Strategies. We are a really awesome team of three humans with very different strengths, helping you become a better human that deals with stress and stuff that happens in your life. Our book club this month for August is called The Little Prince. Oh, we got a tablet version over there. And we're breaking this one down into two parts. This is part one, where we're going to be covering the beginning of the book up through chapter 13. So, first off, I just want to tell you a little brief thing about The Little Prince, because I'm fascinated by how this story came about. I'm probably going to butcher this to all my French speakers. It's written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he was an actual pilot during World War II. He was from France, and he died just a year after this book was published. And in the book, The Little Prince, it's based on a pilot who crash lands, which that actually happened to him. He actually did crash land in his real life. So while this book is a fiction, you have to think it's probably influenced by his experience as a pilot. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask Amy and Rob, first off, what are your first thoughts as you've started reading The Little Prince?
Well, I will say right off the bat, I was surprised, Sierra, I was surprised, but probably not, because I know and know you and know how your mind works, and you're always thinking a little bit deeper than probably many of us. But I was surprised that you chose a children's book as the book selection for this month on the Painted Porch. And so originally when you sent it, I was a little hesitant to go, what are we going to what are we doing here? What are we going to be? What journey is she going to be taking us on with this book?
So, what journey did you go on at the beginning?
Well, I went on a journey along with the pilot as he met and learned more about the Little Prince. How about you, Rob?
Not just the Little Prince, but the other adults, and I think that's where we're going here, right? Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's a little bit quirky. Like there's the one guy who's the accountant, who is, instead of looking at all of the stars, is so engrossed in his work, he forgets to stop and look around, because the Little Prince is a little man, like a little human, who's experiencing big humans and trying to navigate that world of, wow, y'all adults do some weird things, because when you're a kid, you're just carefree. You just have questions. You're just curious. And then when you see adults that have lost that, that childhood spark, I think that's what, this direction that we're going into, which, I didn't know anything about this book. I don't think I'd ever read it. I don't even know if I'd ever heard of it. So to be able to smack dab in the middle of all of these worlds, which I love that he navigates through, right? Because there's an infinite amount of possibilities when you venture out into the world, which is what they're expressing to me.
So, Sierra, what was your motivation? What was your drive to choose this book, The Little Prince?
Well, so I don't want to jump ahead to part two, but I love this book because this book is full of symbolism. And really all of the planets. So in part one today, we're talking about through planet number 4. It's all a symbolism for life and this journey of life and figuring things out. And Rob, you did kind of jump out right into the adult thing, right? And if you notice the very beginning of this book, he actually dedicates this book to an adult. And he's very upset by the fact that he has dedicated this to a grown-up, because he doesn't want to let children down. But then he actually says, okay, I'm actually going to adjust my dedication and say I'm dedicating this to Leon Worth when he was a little boy. So there's a value in this childlike innocence, this why. I think, Rob, even in your program, Master Communications, you talk about the number of words and the number of questions that children ask versus the number of questions adults ask. And is that tamed out of us? Is it beaten out of us? Why is that? Why do we grow up and stop asking why? Why is curiosity looked at something that is less, when really like curiosity is an opportunity to learn. So I was from a big level, I'm drawn to the symbolism of this book, as well as this idea of embracing your childlike curiosity. So my question is, how is it that adults lose the ability to see, in this case, the elephant in the box, in the boa constrictor, or the sheep in the box?
Well, I'll say, I think from my perspective, what I took away from that is it's because as we get older, I think it's less important for us to be curious and inquisitive and want to, in some ways, learn what we don't know. And it's more important for us to be able to have the answer, to have the knowledge, and to not look foolish or silly in not knowing what it is. I when I read and they were saying, "Oh, it's a hat," and when the little prince was commenting about grown-ups in the hat, I immediately thought it's because they forgot how to ask follow-up questions. And so with that, they just went with what they first saw. They saw it, they made a quick decision, and they responded, and they said, "This is what it is. This is what I see."
Yeah. Rob, what do you think?
That was a lot, I think. There's certain things you look past when you're an adult because you're busy, you're overwhelmed, you're an adult. They don't do kids things anymore. I think that's the message of it, is that as we grow, we sometimes feel a little bit more self-important or have more responsibilities. And oftentimes that can get in the way of that curiosity, or that, you know what? I'm just going to sit on the floor and I'm going to look at this drawing that this kid did and see what I can find. We just don't often take time to do that, because the older you get, the more important your time seems, because you have less of it. So it does seem that there's a tendency to rush past details.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you guys just both outlined some big themes for this book. As you probably noticed, we have visited 4 planets so far. And in each planet, there's a different grown-up with some sort of a deficiency that the little prince views as a deficiency. Oftentimes he says, I just don't understand these grown-ups, right? On the first planet, there's a king who is very proud of being the king of his planet. There is no other person on the planet but this king. So this king is the ruler of himself, but takes great pride, has a big ego about being the king, a self-appointed king. This speaks to ego, power, importance. Then on the second planet, there's a very vain man. He's constantly seeking approval. He wants people to applaud him all the time. He needs to feel important. What a crazy grown-up. On the third planet, there's a drunkard, somebody who's just drunk and like in a million different places in all the fields, but like not really in the reality. And on the fourth planet, there's a businessman who, Rob, you were mentioning, the businessman who owns the stars. Although he's not enjoying the stars, he's just counting them because he owns them. So this is a theme that's going to come back around, this idea of how adults have like lost the fun of being a kid, right? Which you guys just both totally pointed out. So as we dive more into that over this week and next, we're going to come back to that, this idea of an adult. But I have another question. So in the Little Prince, he talks about these baobab trees. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Baobab is how I read it. So it starts out as a little tiny, like a little weed. But Little Prince's planet, it's actually not even a planet, it's an asteroid. It's actually so small that if he doesn't pull these baobab seeds out quickly, they grow very fast and they can basically destroy his planet in a very short amount of time. So the baobab is a symbolism. So here's my question. What baobab roots do you deal with in your life? And what do you do on a daily basis to pull them out before they grow too big and take over your planet? And I'm going to ask Rob the question first.
It's a great question. on the spot here, on the fly. I have to think
On the
about.
fly.
So, overwhelm is one that I have to mind my garden about, if you will. So there's certain elements to my normal day where I always feel rushed, where I don't feel like I have enough time to be able to meet my high level of expectations I put on myself. Performance at my job, let's call it. So that is one that is definitely deep rooted that I have to deal with. Maybe not every single day, but multiple days per week.
And how do you pluck that baobab out before it becomes a huge giant tree?
Sometimes it's better than others. Sometimes it's easier to pull it out, just rip it out, and okay, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Other times it's more of an arduous, the root is stuck in there and you got to twist it, you got to do it. But it's trying to find the time to be able to slow down because I'm 44.
That's interesting. The time to slow down.
Yes.
Huh. What an interesting way to say that.
But that's it, right? It's the time to slow down that always ends up helping. Sometimes it just takes more time to slow down than not. In understanding that if I believe that I have everything that I need at this moment, and I tell myself that, no matter what, I'm ready for whatever situation comes up. So, but for 44 years, essentially, I feel like it's been a race, right? It's been a race to get more done, to read the next chapter, and taking that time to say, it's okay if you don't read the chapter right now. You'll get to it when you're ready to get to it. You're that not reading that chapter, that one chapter is not what's going to make you ready for the task at hand. You're ready for the task at hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were just having a conversation, the three of us, on the porch about mindfulness and the idea of overwhelm. And one of the things that overwhelm represents is trying to think about or juggle all of these many different demands, ideas, thoughts, whatever, at the same time. And Sierra, one of the things that you talked about was, those things can still be there, but you don't have to constantly be, juggling them in order to manage them. When it comes to that mindfulness, it's being present on what is needed right now. And, it sounds like, Rob, for you, you're constantly thinking about the 15 other things that you have to do, which then leads to that overwhelm and that sense of being rushed or always behind. You're like the white rabbit, right? You're late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye.
So Amy, for you, what is your that you have to tend to?
I would say my baobab is, I think it's a variation of overwhelm, but it's the clarity of prioritization, or what is most important right now, and constantly feeling like I'm not spending my time focused on that which is most important. I think that's one of my big baobabs, is feeling like I have a massive, the list is never ending. It will always be never ending. That's a whole other concept we can talk about on another conversation.
Okay.
But it is never ending. And yet continually feeling like the thing I'm working on now is not the most important thing that I should be working on.
Yes. So for the little prince, the baobab is one of his most important tasks that keep his asteroid together. So his most important task was his planet, his asteroid, to be more specific. And he talked about in his daily routine, there were a few things that he always did. He always pulled out the little tiny baobab seeds before they could get too big. He always raked out the volcanoes. I think there was 2 that were active and 1 that was dormant. But he talks about, he also raked out the dormant one because you never know. Okay. So those were him prioritizing, because before he realized that he could travel planets, his planet was his planet, right? And if your planet blows up, then all the rest of the stuff on your to-do list is a moot point anyway, right?
Yeah.
So if ever you feel like, as you're working on these things in your own lives, your own baobabs, is allow yourself to have that imagery of the baobabs and the volcanoes maintenance as your top priority. So if you don't do that, the world is going to blow up. Your world is going to blow up, and the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. So if that helps you with prioritizing, then, but I think for everybody, the baobab is a little different. So I know we are running a little short on time, but I want to ask you about one of the characters. I think, the title character is the Little Prince, who, as we understand it, is a boy, or, well, we know he's small. Do they ever actually say he's a boy? Or is his mindset that of curiosity? So do you think, it's a two-part question. Do you think the Little Prince is real or a hallucination? And if he's real, do you think he is a child, or do you think that even matters?
I don't know that it matters whether he's real or imagined, because it could be both ways, right? It could be real, because every time you talk to a child in real life, you get the sense of that curiosity. So the Little Prince could very well be real, but at the same time, it could very well be part of us that we bury down deep as adults and we really forget about, and we don't even really go to look for. So that's why I don't necessarily think it matters, because I think both apply. The kid's real, or the Little Prince is real, and the Little Prince is just part of like your Jiminy Cricket conscience. That's out there like, hey guys, hey, remember we used to draw stuff? It didn't matter what it looked like. It didn't matter what good of a drawer you were. You didn't have to be Picasso or whatever. That's still in there. We're just like, no, get out of here, kid. So I think it's both.
Amy?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Rob there. I think from the context of the story, I think it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he is or not. I think it's all what the deeper lesson, the allegory, right, that they're trying to teach us about what we forget and what we should remember and what we should focus our attention on and what's most important in our lives in order to feel flourishing.
Okay. All right. So the Little Prince, where we're leaving off at this end of this part, is the Little Prince is journeying around the universe. He has left his asteroid. He has gone to now 4 different planets. We're not yet done. Next week, we're going to go to part 2. There's more planets. And so he's kind of telling the past of how he got here to meet this pilot, who is, the pilot is the one telling the story. And he says he's drawing these pictures to try to best remember, but even says, this isn't really a great drawing of the Little Prince, but this was the best I could do, or this is how I remember him looking. Mm-hmm. So this is from the pilot's perspective. I love how you said you don't know if it matters, if it's real or not, because there's lessons in here depending on your perspective and depending on what you take away from the story. I've actually, in doing some research about this book, there are scholars who say you should read this book more than once in your life. They say you should read it when you're young, when you're old, and a few other times in between, because where you are in your life is going to color how you perceive the story. So I'm so excited to see what you guys think about part 2. We're going to be diving into next week. Here we are with, let me show you the book again, The Little Prince. There he is, looking so cute. Any final thoughts about part 1?
I will say one of my favorite lines right at the beginning, which I wrote down, which is, grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it's exhausting for children to have to provide explanations over and over again. And I think that all goes back to the idea of what we lose as we get older. You know, he even says in here, data is what grown-ups use to explain and understand versus observation and intuition. And so I think that's where that's the journey. That's the lesson that's like the overarching theme that I've taken away so far, is what grown-ups think is most important. Which some things still are very important. I'm not going to, discredit grown-ups. They make the world go round. They pay the bills. But it's making sure that you don't lose some of that intuition and observation in lieu of data, ego, counting your stars, and so on.
Well, that's part of the point. We're all on our own planets, right? So whatever ails us, whatever our thing is, that's our planet that we reside in. And we're not always friendly to little princes that come around and ask questions about our existence and our life and our flaws and shortcomings, or whatever the case may be. So that's where I'm really curious to see what other planets, what other worlds, what other humans the little prince goes to visit in the second half of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I hope you join us next week for part 2 of The Little Prince. For Amy and Rob, I am Sierra. We are Painted Porch Strategies. See you next time.